Oh, hello there, eh? I'm not actually gonna do the accent. If you hadn't already heard, today is National Canadian Film Day. Now, when it comes to movies, genres are the quintessential way of deciding what you're gonna watch tonight, assuming you're watching a movie tonight. Genres such as action, mystery, science fiction, romance, drama, all widely consumed on television, in theaters, or on your personal devices. There is, however, one genre that transcends all of these. A genre that is not only integrated into every one of those listed, but is imbued with the essence of our very selves, of society, of life. Is the flannel too much? I think I might. The theatrical category in question has been present since the dawn of time, fluctuating and adapting to suit the contemporary views and opinions of whatever time period it occupies. A genre that pervades both meaning and meta-commentary all at once. A genre so notorious and profound, the Academy won't even consider creating a category for it. This is, of course, the genre of comedy. In honor of National Canadian Film Day, we'll be taking a look at a few of Canada's early 21st century comedies, that being the years between 2000 and 2010. We'll be answering the question of how Canada found its comedic identity in pop culture and media, looking at the external factors of our nation's film industry and some academic theories on the subject. Remember, kids, everyone likes it when you explain why a joke is funny. Before we dive into a Canadian catalog of early 21st century comedic cinema, we'll first need to take a look back at Canadian television to provide some historical context. If you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to leave a like and comment. Maybe even subscribe if you want more content like this. And if you don't, subscribe anyway, it's free. It's no mystery that the US is like Canada's older sibling. We in Canada have imitated and at times emulated a lot of what they've done in the States. Canada does, however, belong to a trio, possessing an additional older sibling that puts the English in full English breakfast. That's right, I'm talking about none other than the UK. Senior archivist Andrew Horrall at Library and Archives Canada takes us back to the 60s with a look at Canada's satire boom. According to Horrall, Canada's emulation of reflected personal and historical ties to Britain came with associated feelings of cultural inferiority. When it comes to the art of satire, the older something is, or the longer it has existed, the more context there is to draw from it. You see where I'm going with this, right? With question of what, and at the time, modern Canada should be, Canadian comedians responded in part by adapting satirical techniques popularized by the British, in order to address or confront public figures and current events much more directly than had been done in traditional Canadian comedy. This era of comedy would lay the foundations for what would be known as the comedy boom of the 1980s, which we'll touch on in a bit. Now, of course, Canada being the youngest sibling meant life would hit it later than it would the older siblings. This did, however, mean that Canada had two prime candidates to test out new formulas and experiment with new processes to see what stuck or what flopped. And this was in all aspects of society, not just media. As the BBC's Rob Salem puts it, Canadian humor is the art of observation. According to the Canadian Encyclopedia, the modern era of English Canadian comedy began in 1973 with the founding of the Toronto branch of Chicago's Second City. In 1975, writer-producer Lorne Michaels was hired by NBC Television to produce a live sketch comedy show out of New York that would become known as Saturday Night Live. Second City would produce its own version of SNL a year later, and it would come to be known as SCTV, and then SCTV Network, and then SCTV Network 90. It went through a few different networks in its shelf life. From 1976 to 1984, the sketch comedy show would have many Canadian comedians in its roster, cycling through cast members like a biker on a film set. You know, hearing that joke back, it wasn't actually that good. I'm just gonna change my flannel again. The comedy boom of the 80s would mark Canada's venture into the world of stand-up comedy. That is to say, it hadn't taken off until this point in time. With comedy clubs springing up all over North America, stand-up comics were able to take advantage of the situation by taking their act on the road. This was a way many comedians found their start in TV and film, including, but not limited to, Jim Carrey, Mike McDonald, and Howie Mandel. Now, skipping ahead in time to look at an excellent, yet somewhat controversial series, Trailer Park Boys.
Boys! You're a cop, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm a cop.
Yeah, I could tell. Next.
And I know you're probably thinking, isn't it National Canadian Film Day? We're getting there. Disclaimer, I am quoting this next part from ChatGPT. Trailer Park Boys is a 2001 Canadian TV series that revolutionized comedy with its unapologetically gritty portrayal of life in a Nova Scotian trailer park. Created by Mike Clattenburg, the show follows the misadventures of a group of colorful characters, including Ricky, Julian, and Bubbles, as they navigate life in the fictional Sunnyvale Trailer Park. Known for its mockumentary style, sharp wit, and irreverent humor, Trailer Park Boys blends satire, social commentary, and character-driven comedy to create a uniquely Canadian cultural phenomenon. Through its iconic characters, quotable dialogue, and subversive storytelling, the series has garnered a dedicated cult following and left an indelible mark on the landscape of Canadian television. End quote. Now, the controversy in question pertains to that of the actor Matt Smith, who played Bubbles. I'm not going to go into it here. What I will tell you is that this series marked a turning point in Canadian comedy history. As Vanity Fair's Bruce McCall puts it, Canadian wits bereft of original material were forced back on the only potential for risibility left, the condition of being Canadian. And that's not the measure of how easy it is to riz someone up. I definitely didn't think that when I read it. Sure, there are tons of examples in both television and film prior to 2001, but none before it were as revolutionary or successful in the attempt to convey a character ensemble's Canadianness in a comedic light. In other words, Trailer Park Boys is an incredibly appealing series to Americans.
Every wall, the ceiling, and my entire trailer, all insulated with bales of weed. And then I drywalled over it so you can't really tell.
Keeping in mind that Americans only had access to Trailer Park Boys in 2014 via its addition to the Netflix catalog. According to Parrot Analytics, the audience demand for Trailer Park Boys is 8.5 times the demand of the average TV series in the United States in the last 30 days. Trailer Park Boys would go on to add 3 movies to the franchise. The 2004 movie in particular demonstrated the prowess of in-house Canadian storytelling and the effectiveness of Canadianness as a sort of premise/outline for comedy. The film earned $3.4 million worldwide at the box office, which for the time, and provided its modest budget of reportedly $5 million, it was considered a success for the creators of the series and the cult following of fans at the time of release. I'm just gonna change my shirt back to red if, I just feel like here in Canada, we like our sports ice cold. One could argue it's a big part of our national identity. Enter Men with Brooms, a 2002 Canadian rom-com directed by Paul Gross that follows 4 former members of a curling team as they reunite under the tutelage of another former curling star to enter a bonspiel, which is a curling tournament for you normies out there. Right off the broom, that already sounds like Canada implementing their own uniqueness with a touch of satire. According to Heritage Saskatchewan's The History of Curling in Canada, curling came to Canada in 1807, 60 years before Canada was a country, with the first club based in Montreal. Supposedly, Scotland invented curling back in the 16th century, which just seems fitting, in that I can picture them saying, "Oi, Angus, the ice has stones all over it. Let me clean it real quick." I can't do an accent. English-Canadian humorist Stephen Leacock believed that mass media and cultural exchange were erasing national differences. He was critical of the idea of national literature. In his words, "We are all just about the same kind of people. The attempt to mark off Canada as a little area all on its own, listening to no one but itself, is as silly as it is ineffective." I should mention that Leacock moved with his family from England to Canada in 1876, carrying along with him some of the UK's influence to our up-and-coming nation. It's probably more accurate to say that Leacock took inspiration from American humorists, with his works commonly being compared to the stylings of Mark Twain and Jerome K. Jerome. You're probably wondering, what does this have to do with curling? Well, nothing in particular. But when it comes to the satirical nature of Men with Brooms, aspects of Canadian identity and stereotype are on full display.
Like riding a bike. Never really lose it, do you? Not really.
You'll notice a theme of that small town underdog type of vibe in quite a few of our examples. Speaking of, let's move on to our next film called Fubar. No, not the 2023 action comedy series on Netflix starring Hollywood legend Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Fubar we're talking about is from 2002, directed by Michael Dowse, following Alberta garage band everymen Terry and Dean. Between Trailer Park Boys and Fubar, Canadians were really beginning to find their stride in small-town, working-class, mockumentary-style premises. People really liked the goofball deadbeat alcoholics with a passion for heavy metal and rock who know how to party, which in my experience are still qualities of merit today, depending on who you ask. You might have been wondering what Fubar stands for, assuming you knew it was an acronym. Fouled up beyond all recognition, or fouled up beyond all repair. Those are also the cleaner translations. And that's pretty much all you need to know about the film. Crazy how the title of a movie can tell you all you need to know before you watch the movie. The true significance of this film can be found in its cultural impact. Yes, headbanger culture back in the day was the equivalent to being a Swiftie in 2023. That's maybe true, don't quote me on that. Despite not making its $10,000 budget back, Fubar would be deemed one of the most successful Canadian comedies at the time of its release. With its originality and given her attitude,
Give her by the river, hey!
that proved Canadian comedies could resonate with audiences internationally and be commercially viable. Fubar would go on to garner a sequel with a $4 million budget and a, shall we say, more refined, proper style of comedic storytelling. Adios to the mockumentary-styled premise. Ye were a faithful companion and trusty vessel that served Canadian storytelling well. No need to mourn, because the bilingual 2006 film, Bon Cop, Bad Cop, once again implements Canada's style to approach comedy. This time, the comedy can't be found in Canadian sports or Canadian music. Believe it or not, it's in Canada's National Police Force. Whoa, was that an unintentional burn? Sorry. There's an element of sports snowshoehorned into this plot, however. When the body of the executive of hockey, Benoit Brissett, is found on the billboard of the border of Quebec and Ontario, the jurisdiction of the crime is shared between the two police forces. Directed by Montreal Quebecer Eric Cannell, this is a film that caters to both French Canadians and the rest of us who speak plain old English. As Bullhorn News' Rowan Arthur puts it, this blend of satire and buddy cop conventions aligns with the North American tradition of using humor to explore societal tensions.
His heart is in Quebec. In Ontario, dans le cul, see? Excuse me? I just said his ass belongs to you.
Now, could Arthur be referring to the linguistic tension / culture clash between Quebec and Ontario? Oh, most definitely. See, we can get along with other nations like the US and the UK, but we can't get along with those based inside our borders. What the poutine, Canada? That's so bad. Like, what the poutine, Canada? What the beaver, Canada? What?
Somehow worse.
What the Mountie, Canada? What the Ottawa, Canada? What the croissant?
That's just French.
I know, that's the point. What the croissant, Canada? Anti-Quebec sentiment refers to a form of prejudice expressed toward the government, culture, and or the francophone people of Quebec, which is just another word for discrimination and people making excuses for why it's so hard to learn French, so why even bother? This film tackles this cultural debate head-on with satirical stylings and nationally conscious context of said societal tensions. Because if you can't make fun of the things that upset you, then you can't fall asleep tonight. Because if you can't address problems in society with an exaggerated scenario of as problematic conventions for commercial gain or entertainment value, then what can you make fun of? Satire 101, people. Despite the lack of a reported sequel in 2017, the film had grossed over $12 million, making it one of the highest grossing Canadian films of all time domestically. Now on to the last film on our must-watch Canadian comedies list. It's The Trotsky, starring everyone's favorite 2000s skinny dork with a funny voice and comedic heartthrob. Jay Baruchel. This man is a national treasure. Directed by actor-writer Jacob Tierney, this comedy drama was released in 2009. The story follows larger-than-life Montreal high schooler Leon Bronstein, who believes he is the reincarnation of the early 20th century Soviet iconoclast Leon Trotsky. The film explores themes of identity, idealism, and the pursuit of social justice, blending humor with thought-provoking commentary on youth activism and rebellion. Leon Trotsky was a prominent figure in the Russian Revolution of 1917. One can apply the views of Marxism to the narrative elements of teenage social normalities. For instance, Leon Bronstein attempts to unionize the student body, viewing the school's administration as the bourgeoisie suppressors of the proletariat students. At this point, we've talked about 2 out of the 3 allies of World War II influencing Canadian storytelling. And here arrives the last, the Soviet Union, aka Russia, aka Soviet Bear Country. With a budget of $6.4 million, the film earned back $440,000 at the box office. Canada by this time had really found their footing in satirical comedy and had risen out of their awkward young adult phase to be fully realized as an independent, established nation that doesn't need to listen to their older siblings any longer. In a condensed chapter of the essay, TV Before TV, published in 1987, Paul Attallah suggests a hypothetical entity or subject that could have absolute knowledge of not only reality and the means of representation, but also the way in which to transfer that reality into the symbolic realm of representation. Translation? Attallah is implying an objective truth in the representation of all things human in media, one that is both devoid of human subjectivity or personal context and experience. Well, that would just be counterintuitive to the idea of comedy, right? Especially Canadian comedy. considering all that we've just talked about. To his credit, this chapter of the essay is called Television Discourse and Situation Comedy. So what have we learned? That Canadian comedy is the product of external influences from the US and UK respectively. That because of these influences, Canadian storytellers had to fall back on the nation's own unique qualities in order for Canada to stand out as its own entertainment dynamo. At the end of the day, all Canada needed to realize is that being Canada is what makes Canada, Canada.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
We here at Archer X Archer want to thank you for your time, and we wish to leave you with this final thought. If you laughed because you thought you should laugh, then is it really all that funny? We'll see you next time. Have a good one, eh? Ugh.